What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the overall market moving forward, what's going on with more news about Tesla in the markets, what you should be watching for as time progresses. But before I begin the devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, deposit $100, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks, and the offer ends in just about 3 weeks. Anyways, for Tesla, I want to talk about something very important. Tesla had quite a bit of bad news that came out for today, such as the fact that the NHTSA is requesting more data for Tesla. They sent an 18-page letter asking for more details about how Tesla is improving their overall capabilities for FSD. And this is happening amidst the investigations involving more potential crashes and things, which the NHTSA believes that Tesla is responsible for when FSD was active. So there's been a lot of talk about that, more talk about layoffs, more talks about Tesla's chairwoman selling about $50 million worth of stock over the past year. And lots of bad news is just continuing to come out about Tesla. So all this bad news that's coming out and all this negative sentiment right now, Tesla's kind of underperforming relative to the market. It's down about 3.76% for the day. And overall, the share price is looking a bit more bearish right now based off technicals. So I'm going to break down more details about the markets. I'll be talking about what's happening so far before I break down more details about Tesla. The first thing you should know is that the Dow Jones has also closed slightly higher, but it's at some tight resistance alongside the S&P 500. And for quite some time, the 10-year Treasury yield has been dipping. It's down another 3 basis points at 4.45%. And that's also going to be very, very important. But we'll see what happens moving forward. When it comes to other pieces of data, I just want to call out that for tomorrow, it is going to be Wednesday, May 8th, 2024. And looking at the way things are looking, at about 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Jefferson from the Fed giving a speech. At 11:30, we have the 17-week bill auction. At 11:45, we have Collins from the Fed giving a speech. The 10-year note auction comes at 1 p.m. And at 1:30, we have Cook from the Fed giving a speech. So some data is coming out for tomorrow and some Fed speakers. It's mainly between 11 o'clock a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And in the morning, I mean, we also have the wholesale inventories. It's all very, very minor data. Much of the data tomorrow was just very minor, nothing too crazy. We're not really seeing anything too insane coming out relative to like a CPI, relative to something else like that. So it's not that bad. So I do anticipate some volatility between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., but nothing else like that, nothing else too crazy. What else is worth noting is that the fear and greed index is currently at fear. And I just want to say that some things are shifting right now. Market momentum is becoming more greedy as we're starting to see buyers still present, but we're at resistance right now. Excuse me, and this is still affecting the way that the market is moving. If we get a big rejection, this could shift back down to neutral. So we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. Then we also have the puts and call options positioning. This is currently at a ratio of about 0.8. The last time we hit this 0.8 area, we kind of dipped and then bounced, but there were other times where we did bounce off of this, such as like right here. So I just want to make it very clear that we're at a very, very critical place and we're starting to see more sellers stepping in. So as the market has been bouncing, we saw a lot of puts being closed, which launched the market up higher because of hedging. And with the delta hedging essentially slowing down, what's been happening is as the market's hitting resistance, we're seeing more put buyers stepping in, more calls being closed, and the shorts are starting to come back as sentiment's becoming fearful again. So we're seeing a big shift in sentiments. Market volatility is currently neutral as we're starting to see the VIX dip even higher. At higher levels and even like more than before. So we're approaching support on the VIX between 12 and 13, especially at the low 13s. And we'll have to see if anything shifts from here. Moving forward, when it comes to the overall earnings calendar, I just want to call out that this is what the calendar looks like so far. So if you want to take a screenshot, you could, at least for now. And then when it comes to the way that things are moving, for tomorrow, it's going to be Wednesday before the market opens. We have Uber, Shopify, and Toyota announcing their earnings tomorrow before open. After the market closes, we have ARM, Robinhood, Airbnb, and AMC announcing their earnings, and a couple more afterwards if you guys are interested in those. But for today, okay, we had Disney in the morning. I already went over all of this. I went over all of this in the morning. But for Rivian, it just came out a couple of hours ago. Also Lyft. So let's talk about Rivian real quick before I break down a couple more things, then start talking about the charts. Rivian, unfortunately, did not have the best of earnings. Just to be very blunt with you, they basically beat expectations on revenue. Their overall deliveries are up about 71% year over year. But what isn't as great is the profitability that's still very, very delayed. So you can see right here, Based off the results, we had about $1.2 billion in revenue above expectations. Losses were wider than expected at a loss of about $1.48 per share. And revenue is up about 82% year over year, but things are still looking kind of weak overall. Their gross margins also improved slightly with a little bit of a loss, but it's because they missed on EPS and they ended up telling us that their profitability is expected slightly for around Q4 of this year. So it's a little bit delayed, of course. So it is what it is, guys. But that's something worth noting, at least for Rivian. That's why share prices are not looking that great for it. On top of all of this, I want to make it very clear that right now, the FOMC meeting is going to be happening on June 12th, and we're expecting a 91% chance the Fed's going to keep rates the same. So that's all that's been said. This could be adjusted depending on what the Fed speakers say, but that's pretty much it. Cantor Fitzgerald is giving an overweight rating for the markets. We're also starting to see the price price ratio dipping a bit. But if anything, this is happening to Tesla because of the fact that it's losing some strength. Wednesdays are historically green about 48% of the time for Tesla. We see more volatility at 10 a.m. and also during the final hours of the day. And that's all I'm really seeing for now, at least in terms of data. The last thing before I start talking about the charts is this: volume is only 75 million, 25% below average. And also, when you look at short volume, this is also at about 61%. This is somewhat above what we've seen from before. So, that being said, guys, I'm going to now go back to the charts and talk about what's happening right over here. So, for Tesla, on the daily time frame, the daily is looking kind of weak, and there is a risk of this dipping even more as we have a gap to fill. So Tesla's looking kind of weak right now. SPY is also looking kind of weak. We got a little rejection potentially coming here. We have this gap to fill over here. There's also another gap over here to fill in this 511 area. Then we also have, let me double check this, the triple Q. The triple Q also has a rejection looking formation on the daily, and there is a little bit of weakness right here. We're seeing something very similar developing on Nvda as well. So we're seeing very similar patterns developing throughout the markets, and that's what I'm seeing so far. Now, looking at Tesla on the hourly time frame, so let's start talking about some levels. Right now, Tesla is in a range, and it's actually starting to lose the range. So we're starting to lose our range. Tesla had basically support at 178. We have resistance at 186. And we've been going back and forth for a little bit over a week. Now, we lost 178, so we're starting to dip more. So we have 175 coming next as our key support. So that's going to be very, very key. If we lose 175, there's going to be a dip coming all the way down to fill our gap at 169. And if we end up bouncing off 175, then yes, Tesla could shuffle for a bit. But I do see a test of 175 as the most likely possibility. Look at support at 175 and then 172, followed by the gap fill at 169. And look at resistance all the way up to about 180. So there's 178, 180, 182, and 186 for Tesla. In my opinion, the odds favor this kind of coming up, shuffling for a bit, and eventually making its way down to 175. I think we're going to test 175 very soon. Shuffle for a bit, and we'll see if it ends up losing that or not. But I see a little bit more downside coming. If we lose 175, a bigger drop is coming all the way down to the low 170s. So watch and see if that ends up being the case, just to be safe. For SPY, however, is in a very, very interesting place. Now, we've been pushing up nicely, but now we're approaching resistance, and we're kind of stuck right over here. This looks like a head and shoulders like structure on SPY. Our resistance happens to be around 518. Note that the last time we hit the 518s, okay, SPY actually rejected off the 518.5 area. That's very close to where our top was, at least for the high of the day. So we're at some tight resistance. Now, SPY is also kind of struggling up here. Notice that we had 1, 2, 3 hours of just rejecting off this 518 area, and we're kind of struggling to really break through it. So if we end up losing support at 516, look for a dip all the way down to 515. Then eventually low levels like 513 are coming. For resistance, if we end up pushing higher, look for that range at about this 517 area. So we'll just have to wait and see how things go. 517.5, then 518.5 is coming next. But I favor that SPY has this head and shoulders, and there's going to be a risk of it coming down to at least 516.64. Eventually a much bigger dip all the way down to the 515s. So I favor that SPY is going to likely dip. I think that there's a very, very good chance of that happening, to coming down to 515 and 513. And I think that that is most likely what's going to end up being the case. So for SPY, with this head and shoulders, I think that this is going to most likely lead to downside. That's the most likely possibility. And I favor that at least strongly for tomorrow. I want to make that very, very clear. But always watch your levels just to be safe. If it breaks 518.5, then we could get close to 520 before we reject. But I don't really favor that. I think it's more likely that the top is in. They grab liquidity right here, and we're about to turn. And this head and shoulders kind of plays out where we kind of like pop, shuffle for a little bit, then start making our way back down. So I find that to be a lot more probable. For the QQQ, it's the same thing essentially. We have resistance at 441 and then 442. If it breaks 442, we can start pushing up to 444. If we end up losing 439.91, we're going to be dipping all the way down to 437 and eventually 435. Looking at the head and shoulders, I find it very probable that this is going to likely, play out. I think that's we're going to likely shuffle for a bit in this range, and the most likely possibilities is coming down to this imbalance fill, coming down all the way down to fill some gaps, coming down to at least 437 by tomorrow, if not below that. So I favor the downside as a strong possibility for tomorrow. For Nvda, Nvidia was trying to push. It was actually attempting very, very nicely, and it kind of failed to really hold its key levels. We're looking kind of weak today as we got a rejection, and we have a high since yesterday. So this kind of looks to me like it's going to pop, retest 908, eventually make our way down to about 892, and eventually lower levels below. So I favor the downside on Nvidia. I think we're going to most likely see that move. So I want to see how things end up perpetuating from here, but I do favor downside as a strong possibility. So I want to see if that ends up being the case for Nvidia, and I think that downside is most likely what's going to end up coming. So we'll have to wait and see if that ends up being the case, and just know that that is what I favor for Nvidia for now. So we might see a move all the way down to 892 and then eventually 885. That could lead to some gap fills, and we are looking kind of weak on the daily, so I kind of called that out. For Aapl has a range right over here. You guys can see it's been trading within this range. We have resistance currently at 182.5 and 183.5. Our support's at 181.33. If we lose this, we're going to be looking for a move all the way down to 180. So I favor it kind of like popping a bit, then eventually coming back down towards 180. So I think that's very probable. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. With that being said, guys, I have gone over at least the large majority of tickers for now. The main five that have the most weight, in my personal opinion, that are very, very popular, at least amongst different investors, different viewers of this channel. So now I'm going to transition to the other charts out there, be kind of brief with this part, and then talk about what I see on the charts for the others. So for Palantir, we just had earnings. We got a big rejection. We're going to be looking for a retest of 21.88 in a rejection. I think we could be coming all the way down towards 20.5. So this chart's looking pretty weak to me. I do favor the downside as a strong possibility, so make sure you're prepared for that. Make sure you're open-minded. For super micro, this is also looking kind of weak to me. I think that there's a very good chance that this could be, potentially rejecting. But with this slanted head and shoulders, we have to just watch and see. If we manage to break 850, we could try to rebound. If we fail to do so, we could be rejecting. Make sure you watch this 803 area. If we lose that, we're going to be dipping all the way down to about 754. So I favor that with the slanted head and shoulders, we could end up rejecting and making our way back down towards 804. If that ends up being the case, we're going to be dipping all the way down towards 854. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. I favor that most likely for super micro. So with that being said, I think we're most likely going to see this dip a little bit. I think that with this potentially happening, super micro is showing some weakness, and I think that there's a very good chance that this could reject here. So with the shuffling that's happening, there could be a rejection. So watch for that very, very carefully. For Rivian, in my personal opinion, is also kind of rejecting, especially after earnings. Going to be looking for a retest of about this 9.58 area. We could actually hit this and reject and start dipping towards 9.36 and even lower levels. So I favor a move down to 9.36 and all the way down to the lower nines. So I think that Rivian has more downside potential. I think that this could kind of rebound a bit and start dipping. So watch and see if this slowly makes its way down towards the $9 area. But with that being said, that's what I'm seeing, at least for Rivian for now. For the IWM Russell 2000, or I'm sorry, this is actually SoFi. I'll talk about the IWM after that. SoFi is also rejecting right here. Turning on the 4-hour, I do see a test of a potentially 6.9 that's likely going to be coming. It might chop around a bit first before it makes its way down. For the IWM Russell 2000 now, I am seeing this also turning right here. We did call this potentially getting up to about 207. I was hoping for about 207. Came a little bit short, hitting 206. We were 1 point off on that. So I think between 206 and 207, that's where it's going to see a temporary top. And we have this nice gap to fill down here. So I think that it's going to likely make its way back down to 202 for a 2.5 point drop, if not higher than that, depending on how things go. If we lose 202.5, we're going to be dipping all the way down to 200. So we'll just have to wait and see if that ends up being the case. But honestly, there is a potential little drop that could be coming. That's going to be very, very key, and we'll wait and see if that ends up happening. For AMD, we have support currently at 154. If we lose this, look for 152, and then lower levels to fill this gap down to 150. We also have resistance at 156. If we break that to the upside, we're going to be looking for 158. But know that AMD, it's kind of turning right over here. We could actually come down to fill our gap, and I think that there's a very, very good chance that that's going to end up being the case. So that being said, I just want to say that AMD is once again dipping. I think that there's a very good chance that this could actually come down to fill the gap, and I think that 150 is a strong possibility. For ARM, ARM is also kind of approaching resistance. We could actually dip down to 104 in my personal opinion. I think that that's going to likely be tested. This is where we have resistance. So this is resistance right over here becoming our support. So 104 is most likely what's going to end up being the case. So watch and see if that ends up happening. For Coinbase, Coinbase, in my personal opinion, is also dipping a little bit. We have this nice range over here. So we have this like 205 area support. We have resistance at about 236. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually retest 220 to eventually make our way down towards about 208. So that could be tested. For Amazon, we're also kind of churning right here. I called out 190 to be tested on Amazon. That's almost exactly where we ended up going to. That's where the high of the day happens to be, and we did end up reaching my targets. So with that being said, we're at resistance. We're kind of at a tight level. So I do see a potential rejection coming in and move back down to 185 as a strong possibility. And then we'll see if it bounces off 185 or not, but I do believe it's going to be testing that at the very least. For Meta, I called out 472. That is almost exactly where the high of the day happens to be too. So we'll have to watch and see, do we end up rejecting or not? I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. If we get a rejection off 472, we're going to be coming back down towards 460. If we end up breaking past 472, we can actually push towards 480. I'm kind of favoring that's going to reject a bit and actually cool down to 460 first before anything else. So I think a 50 EMA test is coming at 460. We'll just have to watch and see just to be safe. For Microsoft, I think that this is likely testing our 409 area. It could actually rebound a bit and start dipping all the way down to about 406. So watch to see if that ends up being the case, and we'll see what the move is from there. But I see some downside being a strong possibility for this. Might retest 406. So watch this. Look for a little rebound, a retest of 412, and then move all the way down to 406 before it continues to trade sideways. That is, in my opinion, the most likely possibility. For Google, Google's turning on the 4-hour time frame. We're approaching resistance right over here at this 174 area. I think it's going to come back down to retest 169. So look for a little push and a drop down to 169 is a strong possibility. For the VIX is also dipping on the 4-hour time frame. We have a gap to fill all the way down here towards the 12 area. So it loves to bounce off 12 to the very, very low 13s. There have been instances where it actually bounced right here off this 13.2 area. Other times it bounces off 12. But basically, we're entering the range where it loves to bounce off of, and that's when the market tends to reject. So we'll have to watch and see what the VIX does. We're very close. We're like 20 cents away from filling the gap. So we could dip a little bit more on the VIX and then try to bounce very since we're approaching some key support. So we'll just have to wait and see what the case ends up being. So watch and see how things go. For Coinbase, not Coinbase, guys. Excuse me. This is the 10-year Treasury yield. We're also kind of looking bearish right now in the 10-year Treasury yield. We'll have to see if this bounces or not as we have two gaps above to fill. Maybe the Fed speakers tomorrow will determine what ends up happening. So we'll just have to wait and see if the market bounces or not. But for now, wait and see what happens with the 10-year Treasury yield, and we'll see what ends up happening from here. Finally, we have the dollar index. The dollar is approaching 105.47. If we break this imbalance could fill all the way up to about 105.75. If the dollar pushes up to fill this imbalance, if it starts pushing up higher and breaking out above this yellow resistance at 105.47, then what's going to likely happen is this will cause downside in the markets. So I'm seeing some technicals that suggest downside's a possibility. So we'll just have to wait and see how things go. So with that being said, guys, as far as Tesla goes, we got some negative news. I'm not going to show you guys all the headlines because I kind of went over everything in my morning videos. I want to make this kind of brief and quick. So there is a risk of Tesla dipping a bit more on the 4-hour time frame. I do see 175 likely coming. And with 175 coming, there is going to be a risk of Tesla potentially turning. So make sure you watch for that very carefully. Know that Tesla is at risk of downside. Make sure that you are open-minded nonetheless, and we'll see what happens at least moving forward from here. So I just want to say I appreciate every single one of you. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. I'll see you guys very soon on the next video. Thank you for listening, guys. Tesla to the moon because the long term is still incredibly bright, no matter what we end up seeing. But for now, I am seeing a move to 175 coming, and if that breaks, it's going to be dipping to the lower 170s, in my opinion. So watch for that for tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. I'll see you guys tomorrow during the morning session, and peace out.